The Holy Spirit is the creator of all matter and exists within matter. Its pure essence will never be found in that matter. You'll never find the Holy Spirit under a microscope, no matter how small a particle you examine, because if you could, it wouldn't be the Spirit and it would be subject to matter, energy, time, and space. And most importantly, if what the spiritual authorities say is true, you have the potential to directly experience this Holy Spirit in this lifetime, because the Spirit is a part of you and is what created you and is what sustains you and is what gives you the consciousness to interact with the world at large. The goal of all spiritual traditions is to merge your river with God's ocean and to return home to the Holy Spirit, beyond the reach of the inevitable death and decay of the vehicle that you chose to play the game of life with. I think it's only logical to examine the idea that you're a spirit and have only temporarily incarnated in this body, and that you can have direct experience of the Holy Spirit in this lifetime. Even if you have to take baby steps and start slowly, I truly believe you won't be disappointed. If you're still hesitant though, I get it, especially if dogmatic fundamentalist religion was slammed down your throat as a child. But remember, religion is not the Spirit, and much of religion is the misinterpretation by men of what enlightened beings through history were trying to teach us. At first glance, it's easy to write off religion as mass delusion, but that's the easy way out because religions rarely have the best emissaries. In fact, the most dogmatic, aggressive messengers are usually the last people who should be speaking for that religion. But when you actually go to the heart of religion and read the actual words written by the spiritual masters, it becomes difficult to deny the wisdom in those words. The religious traditions and rules of men aren't important. And oftentimes the stories behind the religions are allegories and not meant to be taken as literal fact. It's the direct message from the being that beat the final boss in the game of life that's important. In fact, it's hard to think of something more important than the investigation of why we're put on this planet, especially if there is even the smallest possibility that the death of this body is not the end of our existence, and that what we do while we're alive has a spiritual purpose. The idea that we might be able to choose another vehicle after the death of this body to reincarnate into might sound hard to believe, but consider the insanity of the fact that you already incarnated into one body already. Is it really such a stretch to imagine that you won't reincarnate into another vehicle in this universe, or maybe in a higher, more peaceful realm? I don't think it is. To me, that doesn't seem illogical at all. And when you look at every major and minor tradition with all the saints, sages, and enlightened beings, they all say that what we do while we're here has a spiritual purpose and it affects where we go next. If that's not enough of a case for spiritual investigation, listen to what Nikola Tesla, perhaps one of the most brilliant scientific minds in our history, has to say on the universe. Everything is light. In one of its rays is the fate of nations. Each nation has its own ray in the great source of light, which we see as the sun. And remember, no one who had existed is dead. They transformed into light and so still exist. The secret lies in the fact that the light particles restore their original state. When a journalist asked him if he was speaking to the resurrection, he said, "I prefer to call it the return to the previous energy, and Christ and some others knew the secret." Even Einstein believed in more than just soul-crushing materialism. It's true he didn't believe in a personal God, but he believed in an impersonal creator of our universe. He told David Ben-Gurion that there must be something behind the energy, and he told Max Born that he didn't believe that religious belief was a sign of stupidity or unbelief was a sign of intelligence. Einstein might not have believed in a personal God, but he believed in an intelligent spirit which created the universe as well as the laws that govern it. Here are just a few of the things that Einstein said in regards to the Holy Spirit. He said, "Behind all the discernible concatenations, there remains something subtle, intangible, and inexplicable. Veneration for this force is my religion. To that extent, I am in point of fact religious." He also said everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man. He goes on to say that this firm belief in a superior mind reveals itself in the world of experience represents my conception of God. There is no difference between the universe and everything in it with God. That God is not separate, not beyond time and space, not personally conscious entity and exception of one known composite or aspect of it, and that it is us which is conscious. In short, everything else is God, whether living or non-living, conscious or non-conscious, or the universe itself as a whole is God. There is no distinction. These quotes could have been taken from the mouth of Ramana Maharshi or any other non-dualist saint. Einstein might not have believed in a personal God, but he certainly believed in the Holy Spirit, immanent in everything, and the creator and sustainer of this universe. If you read this far, or if you've been listening this far, I think we can agree that science doesn't answer the big questions. You have the choice to leave those questions unexamined, but I believe that in doing so, you are making a major mistake, especially when we live in a time where we have instant access to the entire human history of spiritual wisdom from masters like Buddha, Christ, Ramana Maharshi, Ananda Mayima, and many others. And I promise you this, when you listen to the direct words that they spoke, stripped of the dogma and misinterpretations of their messengers, you can't help but hear wisdom in those words. And more importantly, you can use those words to aim for a direct experience of that Holy Spirit while you're still in this life cycle. The Spirit that exists outside the bounds of time and space, the Spirit that can't die because it was never born, the Spirit that incarnated us into these bodies, and the Spirit that created and sustains this entire universe. You can have direct experience of that Holy Spirit. And it only takes one glimpse of that ultimate reality through direct experience to make you a believer. Unfortunately, I've only had a handful of transcendental experiences in my life, but those experiences were enough to convince me that the Holy Spirit is a reality. And with each day that passes, I get little glimpses into that reality. I can see that this body of mine is just the vehicle, but what I really am is what the thoughts, feelings, and sensations come to. The sights, smells, taste, noises come to me as a spirit through the vehicle of this body. It might take a leap of faith at first to be able to see it, but it's not a big leap, especially when you start to study the right spiritual material, because you begin to see the truth of those words reflected in your actual experience. Things like the presence of God, having a spiritual purpose, being rewarded for being kind and good, feeling love, existing beyond the bounds of name and form. These are all things I've experienced and all things that I believe you can experience as well. If you're with me so far and you're a longtime reader or listener or watcher of my videos, you might be confused, because the bulk of the content I've been delivering since 2012 is about personal development, content on making more money, getting women, having better sex, and getting in better shape. All things that feed the so-called ego and nurture the body. And if you know me on a personal level, you know that I'm far from being a saint. My ego is as big as it's ever been, and yet here I am extolling the values of spirituality. To the intelligent consumer of content, it would seem that spirituality and personal development are in direct opposition to each other. And in many cases they are. But here's the reality. Rome wasn't built in one day, and becoming an enlightened being doesn't happen overnight. The true lions of mankind are 1 in a billion. Pursuing enlightenment or Christ consciousness or Sat Chit Ananda or whatever you want to call it is a noble mission. Beating the final boss in the game of life is a noble mission. Aiming for complete liberation and bliss is, in my opinion, the best thing that you can do for yourself. But that's not going to happen overnight. I've been on the spiritual path for the last 20 years and may very well be on it for the next 50 years or even the next 50 life cycles. If you choose to pursue the spiritual path, prepare for a long walk to the finish line. And in that time, rent is still going to be due. Poverty is still going to be painful. Being sick is still going to hurt. And working a mediocre office job is still going to suck. I will leave it to the false prophets to pretend that they're above the demands of the body and the ego while they collect checks for their teaching and live comfortable lives of material abundance as they sell austerity to the gullible masses. And if you want to move to a monastery and devote your entire waking life to pursuing the ultimate reality, you have my respect, and I tip my hat to you. Because I know that I don't have the discipline to do that, at least not yet. And I know that I still have many attachments to this world and this body. So instead, I choose to walk on the middle path where I can pursue both personal development and spiritual development, and that's the path that I'm offering to you. Personal development is an excellent medicine for the pains of life. When you pursue personal development, you're able to minimize the amount of suffering and maximize the amount of happiness you have in this life cycle. My worldly mission is to minimize the suffering of as many men as I can reach through this vehicle I call revolutionary lifestyle design. And while personal development is an excellent medicine for the suffering in your life, it's not the cure. The cure is total liberation from attachment to the flesh and living purely in the Holy Spirit. I pursue that ultimate goal through observing. And that means observing the entirety of your existence, from anger to lust to going and getting drunk with the boys. You can have human flaws and you can enjoy worldly things while still pursuing the spiritual path. The key is to observe from the point of view of the Spirit. I say a prayer every morning to God to show my gratitude and to ask for closer to communion and to apologize for my sins and occasionally to ask for worldly things. And throughout the day, I carry on focusing on my wealth, health, lifestyle, and relationships, all the while trying and usually failing to stay present and stay in the point of view of that Spirit. But that's the key. You do not have to make radical changes in your life. You just have to adopt the idea that you are the Spirit and to try and pursue life from the point of view of being that Holy Spirit.